All right, hey everyone, this is Ash. Welcome back to the King's Speech. So, Act 2 of Wano is finally over. And, seem to have the bad luck every time I try to take a break from OP, something kind of draws me back into it. Not that I'm complaining, because I am kind of excited now that we're finally getting into maybe the good stuff. A few kind of quick notes before we get any further into this. It's been super disappointing that the past 2 weeks the illegal scans have been causing the series to be trending worldwide way before the official legal releases come out. There's been spoilers abundantly everywhere. I know a lot of good friends of mine have gotten spoiled. Thankfully, I seem to have muted and blocked enough spoiler accounts that I haven't had to worry about too much with regards to that, even though I did get spoiled on a semi-minor thing that probably has bigger implications for the stuff going forward. So I guess that's the only warning is stay safe out there if you want to avoid spoilers. Mute as many keywords as you can. Block on site anyone that you see, either posting illegal scan photos or just talking about the series. If you want to kind of avoid all that. And then, yeah, that's about it. I'll just add that, I'm not disappointed that, One Piece is trending worldwide with all the hype. That's perfectly fine. It's more for the fact, it would be better if it was trending because of the legal releases coming out, not because of illegal scans, kind of making people more inclined to go after that. But the main reason I kind of wanted to do this video is I did a couple of kind of Wano videos already, way back when this arc first started. I talked about Wano Reverie, all that stuff, and I figured now that Act 2 is finally over. Thank God it's over. I thought I'd kind of dive back into a little bit of thoughts on what we might potentially see in chapter 956, what we might potentially see going forward in Wano. Kind of toss out a couple of theories and ideas about discussions I've been seeing about with regards to the chapter online, and just kind of just do a general discussion before Act 3 begins. So I guess the first place we'll kind of start with is, I think the biggest kind of, at least the biggest point of contention right now between a lot of the fandom is how many acts will Wano be overall. So right now the fandom seems kind of split on whether it'll be, third act is the final act and that's it, or if we're going to go according to the traditional structure of a kabuki play and, we'll have to have 5 acts. So it seems like I think Greg was the one that pointed this out on Twitter, but he said that thematically Wano Kabuki plays have a 3-act kind of theme, which is called Jo, Ha, and Q, which says the dramatic pacing goes from a slow start, it speeds up, and then it ends quickly or abruptly in the actual end. So in a kabuki play itself, it typically plays out in 5 acts, starting with Jo, which is a slow opening introducing the characters and plot. The next aspect, Ha, covers the next 3 acts, which speeds events up and ends in a great tragedy and a battle in the second or fourth acts. And the final act, Q, provides a quick and satisfying conclusion. And so, loosely based on kind of like skimming Wikipedia and like other online sites with information on Kabuki plays, I can see kind of arguments for both sides. Why it would end in 3 acts, why it would end in 5. And I've also kind of understand the other debates going around of the Wano will end with the Fire Festival because thematically appropriate. They're celebrating the dead, and this arc has had a strong emphasis on the ghosts of the past and avenging your ancestors and your forebearers and all that. So thematically, yeah, that makes sense. End it with the Fire Festival, which was, an event Oda gave a hard deadline at the start of 104. He's like, all right, Fire Festival is 2 weeks from now. Reverie is 1 week. Have the events kind of line up for that. And then I've also heard, some other YouTubers, some other One Piece fans point out that at the beginning of Wano, Basil Hawkins said, Luffy's probability of, being alive 1 month from now was something like, what was like 14% or so. And so people are speculating that, based on that, Wano would extend past the Fire Festival, for Hawkins's prediction to kind of come true. Also, I have to double check this one. I'm not really sure about. I'll have to double check this later. But if anyone already has this off the top of their head and they want to correct me in the comments below this video, that's fine as well. But if we're expecting the Minks to do their Sulong form, and if we're assuming that the OP world, excuse me, has the traditional lunar cycle of 30 days, you get a full moon. That also kind of jives with the idea of Wano extending to a month, because that means the Minks will actually be able to kind of draw out their Sulong powers. And yeah, apart from that, I guess the big other kind of debate to have on the 3 acts versus 5 acts is kind of what I expect Wano to cover. Kind of how far will, like, what topics will the arc cover? Who else is there? All that kind of stuff. So this is stuff I've been talking about since kind of Wano, before Wano even began. This is something I've been harping on about, so I'll kind of touch up on a few of the key points. I've been kind of harping on since the start of the arc. So first up, who else is going to be involved in this, climactic battle against the now newly formed Kaido and Big Mom alliance? So I think I'll start with the older ones, and I'll drop in some newer theories after that. So actually, no, let me start with the whole lot of speculations that's going on about Frankie's line from the last chapter. So in the last chapter, in the Viz translation, this was something that was mistranslated in the scans. We have had 100% clarification from Steven and a bunch of other people that looked at the original Japanese as well, that Frankie said, he wants to build enough ships to hold 100,000 people. And I think the scanlations only translate as like 10,000 people or so. So yes, it is 100,000 people that he said, and most people have accepted that that's just Frankie exaggerating, as is his normal style, and it's just a joke, and has led other people to think, all right, we will get a bevy more, for a lot more forces showing up in Wano to assist the Straw Hats and their allies against Big Mom and Kaido. Because right now, I'm going off the top of my head, I cannot remember this accurately, but I think Kaido and Orochi's forces is what, 40,000 people, and the Straw Hats have, with their allies, 4,200. So first thing I want to note with that is I don't really buy the overwhelming odds bit on that, really, because we saw this back on Fishman Island, where it was the Straw Hats, 10 people plus a few extras on the side against 100,000 fishmen, and that was barely a challenge. I guess you could say that because it is the Beast Pirates now, and fighting an emperor, the challenge is a more legitimate threat. I still don't buy it. I don't think they're that badly outclassed, but we'll go with the assumption that they are, and they're going to have more people show up. But who else is going to show up? So confirmed, we know for sure that Cat Viper and his crew still have to show up at some point during this arc. That's a guaranteed. He's either going to show up, when Act 3 starts, and he'll join in right at the start as they're about to start the counterattack and raid, or he'll show up later on in the arc, but that's a guarantee he's going to show up. And I think everyone also expects Jinbei to show up at some point as well in his typical, Oda's typical dramatic fish uncle comes to save the day kind of fashion. So I think those two are the guaranteed ones that will show up at some point in the arc, but they're not major players that will really kind of swing the pendulum one way or another to kind of tip the balances either way. I don't believe that's going to be the case. So which other forces could potentially do that? So this is something, like I said, I've been harping on since the start of Wano. The Marines and the Revolutionaries, I still maintain that they are going to send forces that will be actively involved in the battle at Wano and won't just show up, after the fact. And the reason I brought this up, earlier videos and theories and stuff was post Dressrosa, the first thing that we noted was the Revolutionaries, were trying to find out what the location of the smuggling, what the source of the smuggling operation that Doflamingo was part of was. Where was he getting the weapons from that he was exchanging the smile fruits for? And when we saw Koala, report back to Dragon, excuse me, she pointed out that, the weapons were made with the special metal called drunken iron ore. And she pointed out, that this metal alloy can only be found in a very few select countries around the world. And she told Dragon, if we can find out where these weapons are coming from, we can kind of, cut it off at the source, and then cut it off at the source, kind of stop it from being shipped out and starting wars all over these countries. So I don't buy that that's not going to be somehow addressed in Wano with the Revolutionaries kind of just sitting idly by until maybe the Straw Hats overthrow it and Kaido gets overthrown and it just got cut off naturally that way. It's very possible that it could happen that way, but it feels like it'd be a little bit cheap at that point to kind of set up all this foreshadowing, all this insinuation with the Revolutionaries doing all this work to find out where the weapon smuggling is happening, and then just kind of passively sit there and expect, and then have the problem be solved for them that way. So I would be disappointed if that's the route Oda's going over. So I don't think that'll happen. And another thing that some other people pointed out on Twitter and also occurred to me recently was Caribou's cover story after, what was it, Fishman Island, Punk Hazard, in between there, where he landed on what we now know was Kaido's artificial island, where he took on Scotch and he took him out and Drake came and captured him from there. We know that there was a revolutionary leader on there, based on Che Guevara, called Gabaru, who Caribou looks a lot like. And they were fomenting a revolution on that island where the workers were being forced to make weapons for the factory. I feel like that is going, given that Oda chose a very specific revolutionary leader to be involved in that, I feel like that also is going to play a part in the revolutionaries kind of dipping their hands into Wano to kind of find out what happened there. So it should be, again, that's another reason to kind of expect the revolutionaries to be involved in Wano. And then as for the how of it, right now my bet is on the revolutionaries having a mole inside the country. Whether it will be, turns out Gabaru really is actually alive and, he's being imprisoned in Wano somewhere and they free him and he gives out, he somehow managed to send out a distress call or something. I still have a theory going right now that X Drake, or Diaz Drake, I suppose, is working for the Revolutionary Army, and he was sent as a mole to infiltrate Kaido's crew way back. Because we saw this, way back when he first went to Scotch's Island. He seemed very specifically adamant that he wanted to go and find Kaido and get an in with his crew somehow. And I feel like now we know he's involved in this arc, and it seems very, very likely that he's the one that let Law free from the torture and helped him take out Hawkins. It seems very likely that we're gonna find out kind of what his backstory and his deal is. I will say, kind of like the other way it could go is it could also be very well that Drake is a Marine mole. Kind of like what potentially Aokiji might be, where he tries, does a whole shtick of oh, I'm leaving the Marines because they're too corrupt, whatever. He goes on to become a pirate just so he can kind of monitor from their side and report back to them. Yeah, but I think more. I feel like just based on Drake's kind of progression, from obviously worshipping the Marines, when his father was one, up to the point whatever happened to his father became a drunk, and he started abusing Drake. And then Drake got rescued by the Marines and joined their forces. I feel like the fact that he knows about Kuma and the experimentation and everything else, I feel like, again, this ties into another theory I have, but I feel like Vegapunk flipped him from being a Marine supporter of the revolutionaries, because he's like, hey, look, the Marines, they pretend to be all about justice and this and that, but they're actually super corrupt, and they're actually, the revolutionaries are actually idealistically better than them. I will link an editorial I wrote below that kind of goes into this a little bit more about why Vegapunk is potentially revolutionary, but either way, I feel like that's going to be one of the ins for them. And then the other one, so the Marines, how will they get to one, or how will they be involved in this? So at the start of the arc, during Reverie, we know they're monitoring the calls between Big Mom and Kaido. And, Kizaru even asked, hey, Sakazuki, should I go, and send an interception force to break the shit up? And Sakazuki was like, no, Borsellino, I can't send you in right now because it's an unknown military force in Wano. Then later on, you see one of the kings and queens at Reverie, when they're all getting into that big circle. They start talking about, how Wano is a lawless land, and they're like, oh, does it even count as a nation? And they're like, oh, it doesn't participate in the world government's affairs. And they also mention the fact that, oh, hey, feeding an army isn't cheap, arming an army isn't cheap. We kind of need funds and resources to maintain the military force that we have. So I don't feel like it's a coincidental thing that the kings and queens just happen to be talking about an arc that about an island that about a nation that the Straw Hats are currently on, that has an important relevance to the story at large. And so, again, that feels like that ties into the whole thing there. And then we've also seen that, CP0 went and talked to Orochi, and CP0 has a deal with him where, they're providing him, where Orochi's probably potentially providing him, I don't think this was confirmed, potentially providing them with Sea Stone. This seems like this is where the Marine supply of Sea Stone is coming from. He's providing them obviously with weapons, and who knows whatever else. And I think in the just because I reskimmed Wano recently, they promised him a battleship recently for the latest shipment of whatever supplies he's sending them with. And he also threatened that next time they come to him asking for favors, he's gonna demand Vegapunk from them, and he's kind of just mocking them and saying, hey, I've got Kaido on my side. What are you gonna do about it? I wield all the power in this. And this ties into, again, theories of mine related to other stuff, but this is very much like what happened with Mother Carmel back on Big Mom's, during Big Mom's backstory. where the Marines, Karma like upped her price at the last minute to the Marines, dealing with CP0, and CP0 was like, hey, what the hell is this? And Karma was like, hey, I've got all the power in this deal, so you have to do what I want. So I won't get into, kind of like the theory stuff there. But the fact that gave me this vibe makes me think that CP0 is not going to take this, sitting down. They'll be like, all right, we had a good deal with Orochi, but he's starting to overstep his bounds. We need to show him who's boss again. So if we are actually going to see the Marines, sending the battleship back, a battleship to Wano, to Orochi as payment, I can see that being the Marines into Wano, and how they sneak an expeditionary force on there is just, send them along with a battleship to kind of infiltrate it. Uh, this is also tied into other theories I had about Akainu, where I said, Akainu could potentially be the Admiral Perry of the Wano arc. I'm not going to go into detail about who Admiral Perry and everyone is, but if you want to look at that, it's the whole black ships and basically the forced opening of Japanese trading ports through, a show of military might. So I could very well see, a fleet of Marine ships showing up, threatening to buster call the island if Orochi doesn't cede to their demands. And I want to point out the last thing with that is the Marines almost shit themselves when Whitebeard and Shanks were just having a meeting, and they were mobilizing their force, and they're like, oh crap, what is going on? We can't have this. So I feel like, we can't again have the Marines just kind of passively sitting by when Big Mom and Kaido have decided to form an alliance and, kind of just be like, oh, hey, no big deal. We'll deal with this afterwards. Blah, blah, blah. I'll get into end theory stuff related to Kaido with that later. But, because I think it's safe to say the Kaido Big Mom alliance is not going to last past this arc. So it makes no sense for the Marines story to kind of end here with them kind of going, oh, we'll just wait, passively until the arc is over, and then the alliance won't be a big deal. So I don't feel like that's going to happen. So yeah, Marines are going to be involved in this arc somehow. I can't even begin to predict how it's going to happen, but I do expect that. And then on to the newer kind of stuff. Who else could potentially show up? And this was an idea that struck me very recently when fans were talking about, who else from Big Mom's forces could potentially show up and kind of shore up Kaido's forces and numbers and Big Mom's forces numbers. Because Big Mom, I think she only showed up with the Mama Shantae and Perospero, Daifuku, Smoothie, Flampe, and a few other of her children. And this was the idea that hit me, was Germa 66. So we don't know what happened to Germa 66 after Whole Cake Island. We just know that they were clashing with Big Mom's forces, and she did snap out of her whole reverie and kind of go back to take them on after the Straw Hats left. So given, I think everyone can kind of agree that Big Mom's storyline will be wrapped up after Wano. She's going to chase the Straw Hats from Whole Cake, or from Wano to Elbaf, close out her storyline there. It makes sense, at least from my end, that Germa's story will also end with Big Mom's story kind of coming together. Mostly because back on Whole Cake Island, we know that Brook has some kind of history or connection to Germa that he hasn't told us about yet. And again, I can't see that not being addressed at some point in the story. And now that we're kind of getting into the end game, there's not very many places that story can actually play out and finish. And I am 100% convinced that Big Mom has taken over Germa's forces and has potentially, jailed Judge and the rest of them in it. And so, in that regard, I could see Germa's forces coming to Wano to back up Big Mom's forces with Kaido, and that way, they could actually, because Germa's forces are well suited for kind of naval battles and naval combat, so it makes sense for them. Germa with their clone soldiers could shore up Big Mom's and Kaido's numbers closer to being about 100,000 people. So that is a potential possibility of what happens with that. So Germa shows up to Wano with their forces. Once Kaido gets taken out at Wano, Big Mom jumps onto the Germa cruise ship, and then she sets sail for Elbaf to kind of tie things up with the Giants once and for all, possibly trying to do like a military takeover of the island. So I can see that happening. I don't really see any of her children or stuff coming by. I think, I think people have said like expect a Katakuri or some others to show up. I feel like they'll stay on Whole Cake for now to potentially just kind of maintain the territory while Big Mom is away, kind of dealing with her own stuff. They could potentially come back on Elbaf once we get to Big Mom's story ending there, but again, that's kind of like too far in the future to kind of predict about that. But yeah, so those are the other forces, and then we'll kind of dig into some of the other ones, the more obvious ones. So Oda, in a recent interview, I'm not sure which one it is. I'd have to kind of Google it, but I'm pretty sure you can Google it and find out. I think it was there's a famous, I think, Japanese YouTuber or a group of YouTubers. Like there's a YouTuber channel that he went on recently, I think, where they visited Oda's kind of house and like his whole drawing room, manga room, whatever, all that. And they asked him a couple of questions. And I think it was from that or for something else that Oda specifically noted that the big incident that the Straw Hat Grand Fleet will be involved in will be something that's going to happen very, very soon in the story. And given how we found out about, the whole Big Mom Kaido alliance and this whole big battle, it makes sense that the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, this is what they would be involved in, is a clash between two of the emperors, where they kind of come to shore up the Straw Hats and their forces. And again, this was a theory like I was positing way back at the start of Wano when we saw, Luffy get his ass handed to him by Kaido, and later when we saw him suffering from the mummy virus. But if the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, saw his fever card, flaring out and in, as his life force ebbed and flowed with those attacks and everything else happening, I can't believe that they would just kind of be like, oh yeah, it's fine, we'll just kind of totally ignore it and just see what's happening later. It's no big deal, all that. Like, I feel like they will act on that information and try to converge and find out what the hell is going on, with Luffy, what is going on with his Fever card. So that could be how Oda says, that could be how Oda gets the Grand Fleet here, is, have that happen. And because, you'd rush through the 1 week leading up to the Fire Festival, that could be, the interval during which the Grand Fleet actually shows up. So you have the first half of one, the first week, they see his Viva card burning as the stuff with Kaido and the other stuff happens. Then in the training week when he's recovering, they're already on their way to Wano to find out what's happening and help him out with that. So that could be the explanation for how they got there so quickly, make a dramatic entrance at the last minute, ride in like the cavalry to help out Luffy and co. So expect the Grand Fleet to show up as well to shore up the Straw Hats numbers. And the last kind of one forces I'm going to expect to show. This one is more contentious with kind of the overall picture of Wano. A lot of this is my own personal theory. Some of it is speculation. Small part of it is speculation from other fans. A lot of fans seem to expect Marco the Phoenix to show up with Cat Viper to Wano, even though he very explicitly said I'm not going to leave Whitebeard's Island because I have to protect it because Weevil is on his way here at some point and he's after my head. And, so I can't leave these people unprotected, in case he shows up. So I'll get to Weevil in a second, but again, like dealing with the fact that Marco specifically said he wouldn't show up, it makes no sense for him to show up to deliver the message he told Cat Viper, deliver a message to Luffy for me. It makes no sense for him to say that. And then for Oda to say, oh, he decided, whatever, big deal, I'll just go and deliver the message myself. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but does that mean I'm completely dismissing the idea of Cat Viper or Marco showing up? I am not, but that relates to another theory that I have had and been positing for a while. But if the next chapter is going, because when I originally started my theories, I thought that, we would be interspersed cuts of Wano between Reverie, and the events of one arc would kind of affect the other, and we see a back and forth. And I felt like the end of Wano would correspond with the end of Reverie and kind of lead into some potential development in that regard. But it looks like, ever since Oda revealed that, the Fire Festival is 2 weeks away, that meant, Wano was going to end a week before the actual raid on Onigashima. So that leaves a lot of potential room for developments at Reverie to then affect events at Wano instead. And so one of the biggest events at Reverie that I would be surprised if Oda doesn't address in some manner in the next few chapters is the Warlords, because we saw this back in Dressrosa when Fujitora said, when Fujitora hyped up Reverie and said, this year at Reverie, I'm going to make sure the Warlord system is abolished, because we've seen that Crocodile abused the system. We saw that Blackbeards abused the system. We've seen that Doflamingo's abused the system. Law has abused the system. Hancock is continuing to abuse the system. And so, make Fujitora was like pretty damn adamant that, I'm going to make sure that the Warlord system is abolished. And we saw again at Reverie when he was talking with Green Bull, we heard him say, this might, again, memory is fuzzy, this might have been someone else that's saying it, but I remember him saying that, Vegapunk is working on some new weapon that will make the Warlord system, obsolete. So I expect whatever developments happen there. Oh, and we also heard him say that he wants to meet with Riku and Cobra regarding the Warlord system, because Riku was screwed over by Doflamingo, who abused his status as a warlord to take over Dressrosa. And Crocodile did the same thing with his undercover operation to try and take over Alabasta. So again, I feel like the Warlord system at the end of Reverie will have been abolished, which makes me wonder and then question, why did Oda introduce a brand new named character, after the time skip post Dressrosa, called Edward Weevil, and set up this whole subplot of, him pretending to be Whitebeard's son, and then establish an even further, and then throw hints, because I don't think this was actually established canon in the manga, but he was throwing hints through Weaver Card and all the other informational tidbits we got that the Rocks Pirates, who were mentioned by Garp at Reverie, it's very heavily implied that Whitebeard, Big Mom, and Kaido, and Buckin all belong to the Rocks crew at some point in the past. So we have that kind of whole story arc playing out. But Weevil was always kind of like a weird thing for him. It felt like a weird thing for Oda to toss in, for me at least anyway. Mostly because he was a new named character established at a point in the story where we already have set up the plot point of, alright, the Warlord system at some point in the very near future is going to be abolished. So why would you introduce a brand new warlord at the time when Luffy's conflict is escalating from him fighting warlords to him taking on the emperors? And so it's like, all right, what role is Weevil really going to play in this larger conflict, given that the warlords aren't really a significant part of that kind of going forward? And this was something I was thinking about because, like, the only explanations I think when I was discussing this back when it came out was where some fans were saying, "Oh, it's because he needed 7 warlords, and the government wouldn't have just left that seat empty for 2 years." Potentially, maybe yes. I don't know if I really buy that. And the other was, he made him a warlord so he could kind of establish his power level, his threat level, and kind of do that easily. Again, given that we know, the warlord's power levels and strength, relative strengths and threats kind of fluctuate, because at one end you have Buggy, and at the other end you have the world's strongest swordsman Mihawk. So it doesn't really make sense to introduce a character and say, yes, we're gonna use the warlords as a kind of measure to give you an indication of what his strength is like. And given that Kizaru just basically straight up told us that, he's destroyed 16 of the Whitebeard Pirates' allies, and that his strength rivals Whitebeard at his prime, I don't think he really needed to establish the Warlord title to kind of establish Weevil as a threat. So I don't think that was the case. But, so what was the point of all this unless it was like, I had a bunch of theories about this that were kind of blown out the window forward because I expect Weevil to have a mini arc and all that. That kind of went to the crapper. But I expect Weevil to be involved in Wano because I feel like Wano is going to be the culmination and the final kind of ultimate nail in the coffin for a Whitebeard story. Because I've seen speculation that Whitebeard's story would somehow be wrapped up in Elbaf with Big Mom and all that. And that never really made sense to me because we've established that since the start of Wano that Whitebeard has a connection to Wano. He has a connection to its people. And we haven't really established that he has any kind of involvement or relationship to Elbaf or any of the people there, really. That's something Oda could totally toss in at the last minute and be like, oh, hey, actually turns out, the Elbaf Giants really worshipped Whitebeard. They could be like, oh, they did that because, he was so powerful and he's the epitome of strength and a warrior, honor, all that crap. They could kind of toss in the whole Viking mythology and kind of tie Whitebeard to that. But again, it would feel a little bit tacked on to kind of establish that using that kind of regard. So I expect Wano to be the culmination of Whitebeard's arc for a couple of reasons. One, we know that this is probably most likely the island where he and Roger had the conversation about the One Piece. We know that was a Cat Viper, Dogstorm, and Oden were on Whitebeard ship before they jumped to Roger's ship at some point. So we've established that the people of Wano thought highly enough of Whitebeard that they were willing to ride with him on his ship for a period of time before they joined the Pirate King's crew. And I think when I was rereading Wano recently, one of the comments someone noted was that the samurai of Wano entranced Whitebeard, something like that, blah blah blah. So we've established that Whitebeard has a readily available connection to Wano that he does not have to Elbaf. So it makes sense that if his arc was going to be finally tied up and kind of put to rest, and we're kind of launching the next generation of pirates from here, it makes sense that this is where his arc kind of culminates. And we already know that Marco sent Luffy a message regarding something. So it makes sense again if this was going to be Marco's kind of arc to bow out of the story as well and kind of pass the torch as it were to Luffy, to establish him as the next kind of to basically pass on Whitebeard's will to Luffy. And so you know this was something I posited way back at the start of Wano is if Weevil is going to head to Marco, to try to find out where Whitebeard's treasure is and all that, it seems like the whole Marco having sent a message to Luffy through Cat Viper is going to play into that somehow. Either with, my personal theory was that when, Weevil started beating the crap out of Marco, one of the residents of the village will say, oh, I overheard Marco telling Cat Viper to send a message to this guy called Luffy, blah, blah, blah. And then Weevil takes after him to go to Wano to hunt him down. The other kind of speculation relates to another character who I should have mentioned this earlier, but who's also I expect to kind of show up in the Wano arc, and that is Gecko Moria, who we last saw in Act 1. So I think again we can establish that back on Thriller Bark we learned that Moria at one point in the past, Prime Moria was powerful enough to have gone toe to toe with Kaido at some point in the past, and he eventually lost. He lost his entire crew, which is what set him on the path to kind of making zombies. And Weevil, the fact that Weevil has, the stitched on surgical scars around his neck and around one of his arms, makes me wonder if he's a potential Moria creation in some way. I don't think that really works out with the idea that he has a shadow or something else, because I don't remember on Thriller Bark how it works out with someone else putting the shadows into them, because the sunlight's supposed to destroy the zombies. Like anyone that has a shadow doesn't have a shadow can go out. Oh no, shit. No. Marineford, he managed to make zombies with shadows at Marineford. So I think it's only people without shadows get burned up in the sun, but it would still work if Weevil had a shadow, if he was a zombie of some sort. So there could be that potential tie in there where it turns out Buckin, had and Moria are kind of allying to achieve their own ends. But Moria's arc cannot end with Kaido's kind of defeat being handled without him there. Because again, we've already established that there's a tie between Moria and Kaido. And the fact that Moria very recently came back into the story and is potentially allied with Blackbeard makes it very, very likely that they've joined forces and are going to show up at Wano at some point. So that could be the other way it happens is, Weevil rendezvous with them or just hears from Moria, hey, I'm heading to Wano, meet me there, whatever. So that's another potential source of what could happen there. Again, I want to mention a personal theory of mine that when we saw Prime Moria, all muscular and that with his neck, we don't see those little almost like shoelace thread kind of stitches he has in his neck. And so that makes me wonder that, because we've seen that Kaido's entire thing is he wants to break people's spirits, to make them into soldiers. I feel like he did that with Moria, and the reason Moria has those stitches all the way up his neck is Kaido might have bifubricated him with Moria's own scissors. And, that's why Moria, lost so much of his prime strength, was Kaido, basically tortured the hell out of him and crippled him really, really badly. So I feel like, Moria wanting revenge is a very significant plot point. And if Kaido potentially dies in Wano, Moria getting a hold of his body as his new oars opens up all sorts of different possibilities for what could happen with that. So yeah, there's that. Blackbeard, like I said, Blackbeard has to show up at this point as well. Again, I think Greg was the first one that came up with this theory, but I support it as well. The idea that Blackbeard will be the one to kind of land the killing blow on Kaido. But back to Whitebeard stuff, so it makes sense if Weevil is going to show up on Wano to wrap up his Whitebeard's overall arc, then there's two other characters who have to also be there because they have also an established connection to Whitebeard. One similar to Moria, and one who's a complete mystery as of yet. But I'm talking about Sir Crocodile and Jewelry Bonnie. The former we know at some point was defeated by Whitebeard in the New World. Potentially, maybe lost his hand to Whitebeard during that, and possibly got the scar on his face during that struggle as well. And we saw him trying to take Whitebeard's head back on Marineford. So again, I can't imagine the Crocodile wouldn't have heard about someone called Edward Weevil who's going around claiming he's Whitebeard's son and he's looking for his treasure, and that he's actually destroying the Whitebeard pirates, because anyone that actually knew Whitebeard in any regard or respected him in any manner would know that Whitebeard would never betray his family. So I expect Crocodile to show up at some point involved with that, and for us to finally learn what the hell his secret is, and learn kind of Crocodile's backstory and what really happened and how he got those scars. And then the other one, Jewelry Bonnie. Again, this is complete speculation at this point because I think there's two competing theories with this. But at Marineford, we saw her crying when she was watching the war, and she learned that Squard stabbed Whitebeard. I think the other speculative theory is given what we know of her connection to Kuma now. I think some people are speculating that she might have actually been crying over Kuma. I don't believe that just because of what happened after that, where she said, it's all his fault. She went to the New World, and then she went to the New World to hunt someone, and she ran into Blackbeard, who's the one that landed the killing blow on Whitebeard and kind of precipitated this whole war. So Jewelry Bonnie has some kind of connection to Whitebeard. Before I forget, I should also point out that if she was actually crying over Kuma and it had nothing to do with Whitebeard, then her going to the New World to hunt down whoever did it doesn't make any sense, because we saw Kuma was at Marineford, and that was in the first half of the Grand Line, not the second half. But again, Bonnie having some kind of connection to Whitebeard, again, I can't imagine that she's also going to ignore the news about, the potential son of Whitebeard going around doing exactly what we know Whitebeard wouldn't do, which we saw at Marineford, is betray or sell out his allies. I can't believe that if she has a connection to him, she's going to let someone slide with that and, desecrate Whitebeard's memory with regards to that. And so I expect her to show up on Wano at some point as well. And then I feel like, all those threats together will finally wrap up Whitebeard's arc in a neat little bow, and will finally be, completely finished with that little mini arc. So those are more potential, people to show up. Bonnie, especially if I'm right and the Marines are sending a battleship to Wano. If it potentially goes from Reverie, I could see Green Bull hitching a ride on it, because Green Bull is also the other mysterious case of every time an admiral's been introduced, they've typically played a role in the arc that they were introduced in. I don't think any admiral's actually been introduced, foreshadowed, and then kind of boosted off into a later part. Because Fujitora, we heard about him, I think, right after Punk Hazard, and we saw him in Dressrosa. Aokiji, when he was first introduced, we saw him right away in Long Ring Long Land, the Davy Back fight, and then a little bit in Water 7. Akainu was the only one, I think, where we saw him in the past during the Ohara flashback, and then he was introduced during Marineford. Kizaru was introduced straight away during Sabaudi. So it seems odd for me that Oda would introduce Green Bull at Reverie and then potentially sideline him until Elbaf for a later arc to kind of do that. So I don't think that's going to happen either. So I could see potentially Green Bull hitching a ride on Marine Battleship if they are sending it from there to Wano. More characters, Smoker Tashigi. Again, I've gone like way in depth about this, but the fact that I also expect them to be involved in some regard. This ties into longer term stuff about Zoro. I'm not going to really dive into that, except I'll say that I expect Zoro to finally kind of put his enmity with Tashigi to rest when we finally find out, kind of Zoro's maybe potential backstory and Tashigi's backstory, and find out why she and Kuina look so similar. I'm trying to think of anything else, but yeah, so like those, I expect a bunch of forces to kind of show up on Wano. So I'm going to wrap this video up with kind of a little bit of speculation on whether it could be 3 or 5 acts, kind of what I want to see with that. So I think my biggest problem with 3 acts is, again, I feel like everyone's kind of convinced or accepts the fact that there is going to be a failure part in this arc. So the raid is going to fail at some point. And the question is when, because we know the trader in Wano is selling out information. Excuse me. And so this is kind of where I could see kind of the diverging paths going, whether it be 3 acts or whether it be 5 acts. In the 5 act structure, it would make sense for me that they start the raid, everything seems to be going well, then the raid fails at some crucial moment, maybe at the actual fire festival itself, or maybe earlier on in that moment. The traitor gets unmasked, you find out whoever the traitor is. I feel like at that point, when we learn who the traitor is, that's probably when we'll get the Oden flashback and learn, why the traitor did whatever they did and why they sold them out. So I feel like that'll be the point that happens at. And so in the 5 act structure, I could see it as the raid fails, the traitor gets unmasked, boom, you cut to act 4 break, you see some more world developments, and then you go to act 4, then potentially 5 with the actual climactic battle happening, and then maybe the feast, and then Kaido showing up. With the 3 act structure, it could just progress straight from there. With the raid failing, the traitor gets unmasked, they regroup for round 2. And I think the kind of divisive point where it could either break right away was in the last chapter. I think Kinemon mentioned that he and the other samurai are going to go ahead and get to the raid location, which is what is it now? It's a Tokage port, I think. They're going to get there first and kind of set up and get ready. And the Straw Hats were like, and Straw Hats and Luffy were like, yeah, well, we'll go to the Sunny first. We'll pick Sunny up and then we'll meet you there. So if it's going the 3 act structure way, I could see that being how it goes south, is the Straw Hats with the Sunny try to meet up at Tokage port, and when they get there, they find out that all the samurai have been captured. Kinemon and crew have been sold out by whoever the traitor is, and the Straw Hats like either all of them get away or some of them get away trying to break the other samurai free. So I could see that happening as a way the 3 act structure happens, where then they have to then regroup, build a new plan, break everyone out, and retry the raid again. The only problem with that is it feels like it's too much to happen in the span of a day. I think the only time something like that happened was an arc like Dressrosa, but Dressrosa is very, very momentum heavy, and it was done with a much smaller cast, because it's basically the Straw Hats infiltrated, make shit go crazy, and it kind of escalated exponentially from there. And reading back, I think they said, Kinemon said when he's first making the plan, that they're planning to carry out the raid around 5 or 6 in the evening, sometime when the Fire Festival actually starts. So Act 3 could technically potentially work with the raid failing in the morning sometime. They regroup in the afternoon, blah, 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 whatever. Kaido's forces and Big Mom's forces kind of let their guards down because they think the raid has failed. They decide to go party. Straw Hats break everyone out of prison. They attack when Kaido Big Mom forces let their guards down and are partying and all that. That could potentially be how it plays out, but the problem with that for me is like it feels too quick. Like the raid fails and instantly it's back up within a matter of hours. It feels too quick. Like the span of those events feels too quick to happen so simultaneously and so close together. I feel like that wouldn't really give the failure its impact, for the thing. Because one of my good friends, Grant at Heavenly Halbert on Twitter, wrote a great thread about how he thinks the Straw Hats are being supremely overconfident and cocky during Wano, and that this is setting them up. Oda is setting them up for a massive failure. I totally agree. Like reading through this arc, they are taking Kaido way too lightly, even ignoring the fact that they don't know about the Big Mom alliance with Kaido. After everything in Whole Cake Island, where they mentioned the fact that, oh, they've been playing along to Big Mom's tune, they underestimated her, and blah, blah, blah. It feels like, all right, having them do the same thing in Wano, fail, but then instantly reverse their fortunes and kind of just be successful again. It feels like it lessens the impact of them noting that they did take the Emperors too lightly, and that like they should have actually been more serious with it, especially for future kind of events when they end with Big Mom's arc. They kind of go on to the Blackbeard fight. I think that's one of my big problems. And again, if we're expecting kind of the Grand Fleet, like all these other members to show up, again, it feels like a lot to have that happen in under a few hours, where you introduce the fleet, you kind of set up the new raid and plans, and you have everything executed in a matter of hours. It feels like that would be too rushed to squeeze into one act. It feels like it'd make that act feel really, really supremely bloated. It's possible like Oda could potentially pull it off, and it could be really, really good, but I don't know about that. And I think one of my other problems with it is, out of all the antagonists we've kind of had in the series thus far, Kaido's crew feels the least fleshed out, and they feel the most one-dimensional so far, because we know almost literally next to nothing about King. Jack is pretty much, I think someone described Kaido as being potentially, a force of nature kind of villain, which is what Jack is to me. And to me, force of nature villains aren't really super compelling, because all their character and their thing comes from the physical kind of threat they pose. And you can only really kind of take that so far. So again, like Jack is kind of just, again, one-dimensional. Oh, I love destruction, rampage, whatever. Queen is also, again, kind of a joke, where we've heard about, Queen likes to torture and build traps and mechanics and all that. And Chopper so far has dealt with one of Queen's viruses really, really, really easily for someone that's supposed to be potentially established threat. So I'd like to see the Beast Pirates get a little bit more development, because I feel like this is a larger problem Wano has, is Oda's introducing a lot of conceptually cool ideas. Like, the whole stuff with Kawamatsu talking about how, the swords are basically a warrior's soul. And if a warrior falls on a field of battle, his comrades will take his sword back with them, so they can be buried with the thing, because it's basically samurai's soul and you can't leave it. And you have the whole thing with Yakimaru where you got all offended because Kawamatsu was desecrating the warriors' souls and resting places and all that. And we've kind of seen that with the cursed swords with Kitetsu, where he's saying, the swords have a will of their own, and you have to be careful to master them, because the swords will kind of impose their own thing. We saw that with Enma where Enma, of its own will was kind of sucking out Zoro's haki and unleashing it by itself. So these are all ideas conceptually I've talked about a lot, wanting to see explored in Wano. And I don't know if Oda is actually going to devote the time to doing that, or wants to devote the time to doing that, because I feel like it would give this arc so much more life to kind of explore those concepts, because Wano so far has been a lot of glitz and glam, where it's like, all right, yes, the country is very beautiful. There's a lot of culture there, but it's all very, very surface level. So far, we haven't really kind of dug into what makes Wano unique, other than, oh, it looks like Japan. It has a Japanese aesthetic. We kind of haven't really explored the identity of the country. And I think another one of the things I mentioned was, I think I pointed it out on my Twitter when I was doing the read through, was they mentioned that Wano has a caste system, talk about someone belongs to the warrior caste and all that. Again, this was an idea that Oda introduced, but I don't know if he actually plans to do anything with that whole bit. And again, Kaido's backstory, that's something else we still haven't gotten as well. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that could be explored with it in Wano. So I don't know, it feels like if Wano, all it ends up being is this climactic battle, and Oda puts everything into that just to rush through the arc, I don't think it would feel like a complete arc. And you know what? I understand that Oda kind of is running out of time with regards to kind of fully fleshing out some of the things he's introduced. Because I think in a recent interview, like he always normally does, Oda's like, oh, I'm going to finish One Piece in 5 years. And his editor's like, no way, not a chance in hell that's happening. But, every chapter does feel like, the more you hear about Oda's health issues and how he's, trying to laugh off his doctor's concerns about how he's not healthy and he needs to, exercise more and take more breaks. And we've seen this with Shonen Jump, where Oda's being forced, for his own good. And I totally appreciate the fact that Shonen Jump is doing this, where after every 3 weeks they force him to take a week off to kind of rest and recuperate. Because, he does put a lot of himself into this series, and I don't want him, to kind of drag it out and kind of stretch it out for the sake, and ignore his health for the sake of the series. But again, I also feel like, it's not too hard to kind of explore all these conceptual ideas he has and write a compelling story as well. So just in that regard, I feel like having Wano be split into 5 acts works better structurally rather than 3 acts. And I think the last thing I want to mention with this regards to this was, again, the conceptual idea stuff, the torture, where he talks about, Kaido's whole thing is, he likes to break people's spirits, and he likes to do all that. We've seen this with Crocodile, we've seen this with Moria, where they both told Luffy, you have no idea what the New World is like. It crushes your spirit, crumples you up, and kind of tosses you out. And only the truly strong can survive there. And one of the lines that Chopper said during Wano that stuck with me was where he said, oh, don't worry, Luffy's spirit never breaks. And again, this is something I wrote about in an editorial, but I want to see that explored, because the whole Queen, torture chamber stuff in Udon was supposed to be that moment where Luffy's spirit breaks, and it ended up just being an extended training arc where he gets some sea stone cuffs and he masters this new kind of haki. But I'd like to see, an actual moment where after the raid fails, Luffy is left defeated, and and he actually does almost have his spirit broken by Kaido, before he kind of bounces back out of it. And again, that's the reason I feel like, if you do the rush failed raid and then do that, I don't think you'd really capture that effect. Because I don't know if I really am gonna buy Luffy after, what is it, a week and a half or so of training, even with Sea Stone cuffs, is somehow on the level of an emperor. I don't buy that. And depending on how the raid plays out, like if Luffy's involved in the raid and he gets knocked down and then he somehow manages to get back up and take out Kaido again, I'm not sure I buy that kind of victory. And if Luffy's not involved, excuse me, in the failed raid, and his final battle with Kaido is actually later on when this raid is successful, again, I don't know if I buy that after that one defeat where Kaido, knocked him out like a little bitch, Luffy's gonna be like, oh, don't worry, I've overcome all that. That was my low point. That was my low point in this arc, and I'm totally ready to take you out now. So I don't know if I buy how that will play out. But I think at this point, all I can say is we really have to kind of wait to see what direction Wano takes us and what direction really this Act 2 break is going to go. I'm hoping we get to see Reverie. I think I have an idea of where this chapter is going to go just based on that minor spoiler I saw, but that could be just that. Could be a very minor thing. But I'm hoping, because I do want Wano to be a really, really, really good arc. I don't know if it will be. I don't know if this is going to be the arc where I kind of finally have to accept that, character development, character growth, all that stuff is kind of a distant memory, and it's all just going to be action and excitement and world building and, all that kind of stuff. I don't know if that's what this arc is going to kind of establish as the status quo going forward. Like I keep saying, like Wano really will make or break my relationship with this series. Depending on how the rest of this arc plays out, I might become a way more casual reader, or check in on it, every few chapters, kind of see what's going on, just because I'm invested in the story and I want to see where it ends, good or bad. But apart from that, I do have high hopes because I know Oda can write some really compelling, good stuff. Wano has had glimmers of that. The whole Kaido fight stuff was really awesome. The whole Okiku reveal was really good. So I'm hoping he kind of springboards off that to even greater heights with Wano. But yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see. Before I forget, last thing before I wrap up here, Diaz Drake. This was something again I mentioned way back in my Twitter thread some time ago. He recognized Germa 66. He knew Sanji. He recognized Sanji's uniform. He knew he was part of Germa 66. If he is a mole for either the revolutionary, a mole for either the revolutionaries or for the Marines, I expect him to mention that at some point, especially if he's part of the Marines. I expect him to mention the fact that, one of Germa 66's soldiers is here, because Germa, as far as we know, still has participation rights at the Reverie. And so learning that Germa is potentially allied with one of the emperors could be the final kind of push that gives the Marines the nudge to be like, shit, we really have to move on this now. We have to shut this down before, the whole power balance goes out of whack. So I expect that to be brought up at some point. I'd be kind of surprised if it wasn't. But like I said, I'll post a theory editorial in the comments below for this, or in the description for this video below. And tomorrow I will bump some old threads of mine, old Twitter things with a bunch of these theories that I came up with. I'll try to bump them throughout the day. Some of them, either I'll try to bump them throughout the day, or I'll wait till I get home in the evening tomorrow to record the chapter reaction, and then based on what events and stuff played out, if anything relates to anything I've written, then I'll bump those specific tweets. But yeah, I think that's everything I have to say. We'll see. I guess we'll see in the next little while how accurate I was with any of this, or how far off the mark I was with any of my theories and speculations on this. Yeah, like I said, I'm probably now back to reviewing, reacting to One Piece weekly for the foreseeable future, unless something radically changes. Because I commented on my older videos, I was kind of waiting for Act 2 before I dive back in, and sadly I didn't get the chance to take that break because Act 2 ended right when I decided to do that. So yeah, I'll be back to weekly stuff starting tomorrow. So tomorrow, since it's an early chapter day, I'm going to be offline off of Twitter after about 2 o'clock tomorrow, because I don't want to see anyone's reactions to the chapter or any events before I get a chance to react to it. After that, the weeks following, it'll be back to normal on Sunday. I should be out within an hour or so after the chapter actually drops. But that's about it. For the other Shonen Jump stuff, I'll be reacting to Haikyuu tomorrow as well, which I'm probably actually more excited about to react to than One Piece. And as normal for everyone that follows my other read-through stuff, Alita and Vinland Saga will be out this weekend as well. Probably Saturday, maybe Sunday. And until next time, this is Ash. I'll talk to y'all later.